thank you very much for coming in to do the show.
Thank you for having me.
You've other reasons to be in Ireland, though, because you're sort of Irish, aren't you?
My mother's Irish, yeah.
What are the family names?
Her mother's married last name, her father's name was Hickey,
Yeah.
and her mother's maiden name was Egan.
So we're looking for Hickeys and Egans out there to whom you belong.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. We'll talk about your career and what a fantastic success you have had over the last few years, but I'd like to go back into your background.
Okay.
Some people know all about you and other people probably know little enough. You come from a mixed background.
My father's half black, half Venezuelan, and my mother's Irish.
Okay. You grew up in New York. Was there any problem being from a multiracial marriage?
There were a lot of problems, I think, more with my family, you know, more so with my older brother and sister, and I guess my mother and father experienced a lot of problems. But I think it was, if anything, for me, it was just my own kind of understanding of who I was and understanding myself and how to look at myself as an interracial person. It's kind of a weird thing. If you're not, it's hard to explain to somebody if you don't go through it.
But you weren't being taunted in the streets or anything like that?
No.
Yeah. Your mum raised you pretty much as a single parent for much of your childhood. Was that tough?
You know what, I'm actually glad that she did, because to me, if people aren't happy together and they stay together for the kids, it's usually kids can tell anyway. So she and I did okay.
Yeah. The music comes from your mum's side, isn't it?
Yeah.
She is, I'm told, a very talented singer in the operatic style. Is that so?
Yeah, she is. She sings all types of music, but she did sing with City Opera when I was really little. Actually, in the hotel last night, there was a piano, and she was giving my backup singers a little bit of what she does. She's also a vocal coach. So it was, all of a sudden, I heard this operatic voice coming from upstairs, and it was my mom. It was nice.
Yeah. Now, you as a child, because your siblings were older than you, you effectively were, in many senses, an only child. So did that turn you into an introspective person, or do you think you're that kind of person anyway?
Well, I think in a lot of ways I am, but I also kind of compensated by being like the clown at school, or, you know, that type of thing. And also using my music as like a way to kind of channel any kind of emotions or things like that I was going through.
When did your mom realize that you had some little talent as a child?
She says when I was like 3 or 4, she was rehearsing an aria over and over, and she made a mistake, and I sang it for her in Italian the right way. I don't remember it, but she tells the story a lot. So I guess I feel like I've been singing my whole life. Like, there's never been a time when I didn't know that I wanted to sing.
In the part of New York that you grew up in Long Island, I mean, looking around at the people you grew up with, have all of them done well? Some of them done well? Some of them done really badly?
I think that a lot of people who I grew up with who were more privileged or whatever, for some reason, it made them a little less driven than I was, because I was driven since I was 13 years old, writing songs, singing songs, working in studios, meeting musicians. And a lot of them, you know, when I was making my first album, they were just going to college. They were, you know, starting out. And some of them haven't really decided what they want to do. Some people still live at home. Some people have done really well. So, but I guess a lot of the people I know who I used to envy when I was growing up and wish I had all the things that they had, kind of were more content to stay there, you know.
Are there people, though, that you look at and see that they've been very unfortunate in life and say, there, but for the grace of God, go I?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, people went to the bad. Could it have happened to you, do you think?
I guess it could have happened to anybody, I mean, if I were a different person. But I think one of the good things is that I did have you know, my mother was very supportive of me and of my dream of being a successful recording artist. And a lot of people would have looked at it like, you know, don't encourage her, this is a pipe dream, there's no way this could ever happen. But she really was very supportive. And I also looked at anybody who I saw who I didn't want to be like when I grew up, and kind of did exactly the opposite of what they did.
Are you serious? You were that clued in at that stage? You say, I don't want to be like that person. But still, there are hundreds of aspirants out there who want to make it in the music business, and it tends to be a mixture of talent, opportunity, and good fortune, which makes it happen. Definitely. So tell me about your, I suppose, Cinderella story, really.
You could say that, I guess. I don't know. That's a weird term because I don't know, it makes it seem like everything was really easy, but in fact, to me, it was like my whole life was a struggle to get to this point. But, well, I started singing when I was 4. I started writing when I was like 13. And I was making demos while I was in high school, some of the songs that ended up on my first album. And I ended up moving to the city at like 17. My brother paid for my first demo. And I lived with one of his friends, a girl. She let me stay in her apartment, and I lived in this little loft, like the size of these 2 benches right here, really small, little tiny thing above her kitchen. And I used to just work, and then sometimes I would work as a waitress and as a coat checker and all these things, and all the while doing demos. Finally, these musicians, I used to live on the Upper West Side, and these musicians would see me and be like, what is this kid doing here? Why is she, here? And kind of laugh. They were like older, in their mid-20s, whatever.
They're not laughing now.
They're not laughing now, but then when they heard me sing, they started to want to use me on their tapes and want to recommend me for jobs. So they recommended me to a girl named Brenda K. Starr, who had a hit record with the song I just sang. And one of her backup singers had quit, and I went and I auditioned, and she really liked me, and she gave me the job. I auditioned with that song, and that's why I remade the song, because it's kind of like in tribute to her. And I was her backup singer. She used to listen to my tape. She was totally supportive, and she brought me to a party. Well, I actually had a deal pending with Warner Brothers, because the guy that I was writing music with.
So it was going to happen anyway, you reckon?
Right. It was like right on the verge of, they wanted to put my songs in this movie, and they wanted to give me a deal as a solo artist, but it was through the guy that I was writing with at the time.
Okay, just to check, how old were you at this point?
18.
Wow.
So he and I had this other deal going on. And then Brenda was going to take me to this party, so I was like, I don't know if I'm going to go. I don't really need to go, blah, blah, blah. But I went anyway. So I had all her clothes on except her shoes. Her shoes didn't fit me. My feet were too big for her shoes. So I had this little mini dress on and all this stuff. And then I had like these really ugly sneakers with thick socks. It wasn't very sexy. But so I went to the party, and she introduced me. She went to hand my tape to this guy named Jerry Greenberg, who was opening up his own record company. And Tommy Mottola was there, and he grabbed the tape, who was the head of Sony Music.
Yeah.
He grabbed the tape.
Headed off in his car, stuck the tape in the
Oh, you know the
dash.
story.
And what happened then?
And he turned around and came back, because he didn't believe it was the same girl that he saw in the
This voice did not match this kid in sneakers
and
a short dress.
cheerleading jacket and stuff, So he came back, but I was gone. And then he found me through Brenda's managers, because the tape didn't have my name on it either.
You went on to marry Tommy, and you were married for how many years?
3.5.
Yeah. Was that, in retrospect, a huge mistake, or was it a valuable learning thing that you had to go through, really?
Well, I think I've always had issues about marriage, because I never really understood, because most people that I saw, most people's parents were divorced, like that I knew growing up. So I just never wanted to get divorced. So I said, why get married if you're just going to get divorced?
You can't get divorced if you ain't married.
Exactly. So I had my own issues with it, and I think it probably would have been better. I think it was too early on for me.
So what's your status today? Are you free, single, and happy?
Yeah, basically. I think so.
Because you're very young, you get married, you have all the trappings of success, but a lot of people have a bit of growing to do, with, learning how to handle money, learning how to handle success. And you did it within a marriage, and then do you have to relearn it all over again? Is it different outside of a marriage?
Well, the one thing to me that's different, just in terms of there's a lot of things that are different, but fortunately I don't have to actually handle my own money and to keep my own books, because they'd be a mess, because I'm really bad with numbers. But just being totally aware of what everybody's doing around you is like a difficult thing.
Are you a control freak?
Not by choice. I am with my music, and I am with a lot of things, but I like to not have to be.